If you're looking to invest in real estate to create generational wealth, you have to check out today's conversation with Gian Pazzia. Now, Gian helps investors understand how to leverage cost segregation for their deals, but it's not just for larger commercial investments. You can utilize cost segregations on single family rentals as well. On top of that, Gian shares why it's so important for investors to utilize this strategy, particularly as a part of estate planning. So if you are looking to create and invest in properties to pass down to your children or to others, you want to make sure you understand some of the different strategies that can allow your children to take full advantage of these investment vehicles. Make sure you check out today's conversation right here on Multifamily Insights. You probably got interested in real estate for the cash flow, the tax advantages, the equity appreciation, and the long-term wealth creation, not for the 2 a.m. emergency maintenance calls. But let's face it, maintenance can be the biggest headache when it comes to building up your real estate portfolio. And that's why I want to tell you about a new property management software called Hemlane. See, Hemlane is more than your typical software. It's really like having a property management support system. First, Hemlane provides 24/7 repair coordination. They have a network of vetted maintenance technicians and professionals in your area to handle repair and maintenance your property may need. Second, Hemlane helps you advertise your listings and even connects you to licensed agents to help find and place tenants. And third, Hemlane is ranked #1 by Gartner with an average of 4.8 star reviews on repair coordination. Learn how Hemlane can help you manage your properties with 100% transparency and control without the administrative work. And as a Multifamily Insights listener, you will receive 25% off for 2 months when you sign up. Just go to hemlane.com, that's HEMLANE.com, and use Multifamily Podcast 25 as the promo code. Again, that's hemlane.com, or just click the link in the show notes. Gian helps companies, real estate owners, and CPAs unlock proven tax strategies and incentives created by Congress so that they can invest in growth. Now, he has been doing this for over 25 years, and he started his career at one of the big 4 accounting firms, not as a CPA, but as a structural engineer. Let's welcome to the show, Gian Pazzia.
Thank you very much, John. Thanks for the great intro. I'm really glad to be here.
We were talking before in the green room. Did I say your last name right, man? I told you I don't want anybody telling me how terrible my Italian accents are.
You did it. You put the emphasis right on the 2 Z's, Pazzia. But here, Pazzia is what most people say. But you got closer to the actual pronunciation.
I will take it. All right. Well, listen, I went over your bio and background at a high level. Take 2 minutes and give us more context.
Yeah, so my background's as a cost segregation engineer. That's how I fell into this industry of tax consulting. I mentioned I went to school to be a structural engineer at Purdue, fell into this work, started my career with a company called Arthur Andersen. They were one of the big 5 CPA firms back in the day. I was doing these studies for these major casinos, major retailers, pharmaceutical companies that you've all heard of. And basically, cost segregation, back then there wasn't a lot of talent and people that did what I did. And these days, there's just a lot more. It's more accessible to even small investors that we'll talk about later. And what it is it's a way for real estate investors to pay less in taxes by speeding up how fast they're going to write off parts of their building, right? And so normally the tax rules say that you have to write off an investment property over 27 years or and sometimes 39 years, depending on the type of property. But not everything inside the building lasts that long. And so there's, like everything in tax, complicated rules. But to give you some examples, things like vinyl flooring if in a multifamily building, or cabinetry, appliances, even the wiring that's connected to those appliances, stuff outside the building like asphalt, driveways, those can all be written off much quicker than that 27 or 39 years. And so cost segregation, cost seg study breaks the property into all these different pieces, and you get to write them off. And in a lot of cases in year 1, okay? And I'm referring to bonus depreciation now, which we can talk a little bit about. So you're getting these bigger tax deductions right away instead of spreading them out over decades. And so I like to, I can break this down into kind of an example here with some numbers. I'll use, let's say you buy a small rental home, right, for $270,000. You get to, under the normal rules, you're going to get to write off that rental home. You're gonna write off $10,000 each year for 27 years. Okay. But if you do a cost segregation study, as much as 25% of that number can be written off in year one. And so now the difference is you're talking about $54,000 of deductions in year one versus 10,000. So you get that $44,000 difference. And of course, I know a lot of your listeners are buying much bigger properties. The numbers just keep getting bigger, as the purchase price of the properties get bigger.
Yeah, man. I love how you talked about that, right? Your background really came on the other side, being that cost seg engineer and doing these studies for Arthur Andersen. And I laugh because my wife was a CPA for many years as well, and came up with one of the big four, previously big five. So I have just like on the edge knowledge of some of these things. But when you talk about the cost seg, it's a powerful tool. And you did an excellent job of explaining what it is for those who are not familiar. But it's a tool that allows you to depreciate the asset faster than what Congress typically allows, which is that 27 and a half years. You can now accelerate that and take that, really in that first year. You know, for people who just conceptually don't understand this, right? Why does this even exist? It's like,
Yeah.
why not just change it where I can take the depreciation where I want, or just remove it altogether? Like, what is the real benefit to that investor or that business owner to take the depreciation, to take that cost seg study to help?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, why it exists, the way the tax code is written, basically things that are primarily used for business purposes, you can write off quicker. Buildings, they last a long time. So the concept of just making sure you write off the assets that last longer over the normal life of the asset. That's kind of the background. But why do people do it? Obviously it's to unlock depreciation. It's to create taper losses. And so this has been something that, pretty much all sophisticated real estate investors that pay tax or that have taxable situations are using. The most famous being Donald Trump. There's a reason why he didn't want to show his tax returns, and it's 90% of it is because of accelerated depreciation. I work with a lot of clients that are real estate syndicators, real estate developers, and the way the tax rules are written in this country, they've been slanted towards real estate investors and developers for many years. And if you play the game right, you're doing these accelerated depreciation studies. And then when you've kind of run out of depreciation, you trade out of the building you trade up into a new building, you create more depreciable basis. You get to do the cost seg over again on the next building. And it's this cycle that you can plan for, like you said, and effectively, almost pay zero tax if you do it right.
And that's the thing, right? We're really talking about not just making more money through real estate, which is great. We all want to do that. But the other side of that equation is you got to keep more money. And it doesn't help when you do a great deal and then you got to pay, 40, 50% to Uncle Sam. So finding ways and strategies to mitigate that and keep more in your pocket is going to help you create and generate real wealth. So you mentioned, again, famous folks who are using these strategies. It feels like something, though, that is limited to businesses and commercial real estate. Can you talk about like the entry level? Like if you have that house for $270,000, is this a legit strategy you can employ, or is this only reserved for larger investment opportunities?
Yeah, if you asked me this question, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I would say, yeah, a single family house wouldn't make sense to do cost segregation. We actually are the first company to launch a online self-service software specifically so that smaller residential rental investors can do this themselves online. Our website is costsegregation.com. You go there, you click on software, and basically it works for residential rental properties that are 6 units or less, right? So condos, townhomes, single family rentals, fourplexes, and a basically a tax depreciation basis of $1.2 million or less. So, there's a lot of people that kind of fit into that category. And for about $500, you go in there, you put in, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, what kind of flooring, what appliances came with it, how many parking spots are in the driveway, a number of questions. It takes about less than 15 minutes, and you'll get a report that you can hand to your CPA that they can basically use to get these deductions for you.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, right? So you're basically saying, hey, this is now open for any real estate investor to some degree, right? Because now it can be for use for 6 units or less. It doesn't require, well, let's actually talk about that. You mentioned this online software. I know the cost segregations that I've done have required someone to come out to the property, sometimes local, sometimes they're hopping on a plane, but they're coming out to
Yeah.
the property. They're going into a number of units. They're taking measurements and they are putting together a report. And usually there's a physical inspection component to that. Is that still the case with the software, or is that something that you can now circumvent because of just how technology has
Yeah.
evolved?
Yeah. No, thanks. What you described is the traditional cost segregation, process. And we're one of the biggest cost segregation firms in the country. We've been doing it for 25 years, and 99% of our business is what you described. We send people out to these bigger properties. We're doing physical measurements of everything. We're taking pictures, putting them in a report. And when the stuff gets audited by the IRS, yeah, they want to see that kind of report. Um, you're talking about buildings that are much bigger, where the dollars are much more substantial, and much higher likelihood of audit and all that stuff. And um, so yes, we do those types of studies. Those types of studies can cost, $5,000 to $10,000 depending on the size of the property, right? If you've got a 400 unit building, it can be on the higher end of that. Um, and so, this software, it was designed to get you, you know, 80% of the benefit at 20% of the cost, right? And so we've opened up the door to these smaller investors. It does not include a third party company coming out and visiting the site, but that's okay as long as the owner is putting in the correct information about their property. It will work. We've been through IRS audit a number of times, with their engineers reviewing our studies, requesting more information, and we've had zero adjustments to any of our studies under audit. And we launched since 2016.
No, I love that. I think that's great. And it's funny because I remember the first time I even heard about cost segregation, I was listening to a podcast and I was doing a flip project. And I was like, wait, what? What is this? And I remember just really capturing my imagination of like, okay, this is great. The other side of that coin, though, is typically when you sell, there's a recapture component, right? And I don't know if enough investors talk about it or think about it. And it kind of like dulls the shine of this magical tool when you have to factor in the recapture.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? And then also, are there some benefits or strategies to continue to take advantage of this strategy without necessarily dulling kind of the recapture component?
Yeah, look, so you're absolutely right. Recapture is something that probably
And
gets
explain that because
overlooked.
maybe I don't know
Yeah.
if everyone knows what that is. And
Yeah. So what recapture is basically, if let's say you buy a car, right? An automobile that you use for your business, you're supposed to depreciate it over 5 years, right? So you buy it for 50 grand. After 5 years, you fully wrote it off. Okay. If you then sell the car for 50 grand after 5 years, so depreciation is supposed to help you offset like the wear and tear of an asset. Well, if that asset doesn't actually go down in value like that car, and you're selling it for the same amount after 5 years when you've got the benefit of the depreciation, you basically have to pay that depreciation back. All the tax write-offs that you got, that 50,000 of tax write-offs over 5 years, when you pay tax, um, you, you basically are getting essentially a gain of 50,000. You have to pay it all back, right? And so it's the same with depreciation in buildings when you're accelerating it, right? So if you're buying this property and you get, you know, let's say $500,000 of accelerated depreciation over the first 5 years, and the property value is going to go up, right? You're essentially giving back these tax benefits up to the point at which you've taken them. And so you're not gaining anything if you do a cost seg in year one and you sell it in year two, because you're getting something for 1 year. You're borrowing it for 1 year. The magic of cost seg is when you're holding for 3 years or longer, it starts to make sense because you're getting that time value of money. You're getting to keep and use that money to invest in other places. Okay. And so yeah, you touched on something, when to not do a cost seg study. You shouldn't do the cost seg study if you're planning on selling within 3 years for cash, meaning you're not going to do a 1031 exchange. You're planning on taking your cash out and having to pay tax on whatever is happening there. But most investors do 1031 exchanges, and that whole issue goes away. So as long as you are holding it for more than 3 years, or you're planning to exchange, within 3 years, then cost seg, makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and I think that's the insider part, right? It's a great strategy. There's lots of value in it, but I do think that you have to understand how to utilize and apply the strategy in order to maximize it. And I love your point there. If you are looking at this strategy, make sure you're holding the asset at least 3 years. If you're going to hold it and try to flip it in 18 months, this is not going to work as well as you would like it to work, unless you're doing exchanges over and over. Maybe then it still works, but otherwise, you may want to look at other strategies that can help you. So I appreciate you breaking that down and helping us. Now, when it comes to cost segregation, or, maybe there are other strategies as well, but like, what are some misnomers or some mistakes you see people making when applying this or other tax benefit strategies?
Well, right, with cost seg, it's what you said. It's um, not understanding kind of what happens when you sell. That needs to be very clear up front. I've seen situations where there's some quirky rules, especially if you're doing 1031. Let's say you exchange into a building, right? So you sold a building for $1 million, and now you're buying a $2 million building, and you go out and you get a quote for a cost segregation study, and you tell the guy, "Hey, I bought this for $2 million." They turn around and say, "Great, you're going to save $500,000 because you bought a $2 million building." And then, that investor gets all excited. He's planning for that $500,000 of deductions for the year. And then the end of the year comes, and that person's CPA looks at it and says, "Wait a minute, you actually aren't going to get $500,000 because you did a 1031 exchange into this building, and there's not as much depreciation to work with as you thought." And so that's something that I've seen happen a lot when you're doing a 1031 exchange. You don't get to start depreciating $2 million all over again. There's these sometimes very complicated calculations you have to make. And so in that example, if you sold a building that you've owned for 30 years, it was in your family, it's likely fully depreciated. You have zero depreciation left on it. Now you bought a $2 million building. Okay. You sold it for $1 million, but you only essentially have about $1 million to work with in that case of new depreciation. And so that's something to kind of keep an eye out for. Is Gets very tricky when there's 1031 exchanges. You want to make sure that you're getting accurate projections.
And that million that you're referencing, is that kind of the difference between what you sold or exchanged that first property for and the cost of the new property?
That's right. That's right. And by the way, just to make this a little simpler, I'm assuming there's no land value. Now, land you're not supposed to depreciate, right? And so, just keep that in mind. When I'm talking about some of these numbers, I'm just kind of pretending there's zero land value. If you bought a property for $2 million, let's say there might be $500,000 of that would be land. You can't even depreciate that. So what's left is $1.5 million, right, of depreciable basis. So yeah, to answer your question, when you're talking about a 1031 exchange, it's that you're always going to create new basis, right? You're going to get to depreciate absolutely the difference between the new purchase price and what you sold the old property for, okay? That $1 million that you pointed out, and whatever's left of the old property that you sold. So if you bought a property 4 years ago for $1 million and you depreciated $200,000 over 4 years, you have $800,000 left. And then you bought this $2 million property, right? So like you said, you get the $1 million difference between 2 million and the sale price. It's $1 million, and you get to roll over whatever is left from the old property, which is 800,000. So in that case, you get about $1.8 million of, call it, basis to work with.
Got it. I've never had it broken down like that on the show, so it's great to hear. And I'm trying to replay it to see if I really was, if I really learned, if I could pass the test, right? So what you're saying is, we do a deal, let's just say we buy it for $1 million. We do the depreciation of that, and let's say we get 200,000 for the depreciation. We do a 1031 exchange. We buy a new property for $2 million, so $1 million more than that first property. But because we only applied $200,000 of the depreciation on the first deal, we have 800,000 left on that first deal, plus the $1 million price difference of the first deal and the second deal. So I have a total of $1.8 million that I can depreciate on this new asset. Did I understand that right?
Yeah, you got the math 100%. And like I said, we're pretending that there's no land values in any of these purchases.
Yeah. But conceptually, I think it helps people understand, hey, even if you were going to sell or 1031 exchange, here's how you look at that, and here's where the benefit is. Because again, if you're doing the bonus depreciation, the challenge for you becomes, well, if you do that, and I'm going to talk about that next, by the way, but if you take all that and you accelerate some of that depreciation up front, when you buy that new property, well, that chunk is now gone. So you don't get a chance to start that clock back over and take that. You've kind of missed it. So there is some ebb and flow and some give you have to take, if you're going to employ this strategy. Let's talk about bonus depreciation. You mentioned that it allows you to accelerate how quickly you can take some of the losses. We know recently over the last few years, there's been some legislation change where it went from, 100% depreciation down to 80, and I think it's down to 60 now. Can you talk about kind of where things sit in regards to bonus depreciation, and how do you look at it when you're talking to your clients now? Is this something that you are still advising them to take advantage of, or has that benefit kind of gone away where it's not really something they should push?
Yeah. So bonus depreciation, for those that are not familiar, means anything inside the building that I've talked about segregating, that for shorter lives. Essentially, in 2018, they implemented what was called 100% bonus depreciation, which means you get to write it all off in year one, all of it. So instead of writing it off over 5 or 15 years, these components that I mentioned earlier, all of it in year one. And then it's phased down. Then the following year, or excuse me, it's down to 40% for 2025 right now. And so that means if there is $1 million of these short life components, you get to claim 400,000, 40%, right away and write off the rest over the 5, 7, or 15 years. And so the nice thing is that President Trump, he announced in his presidential address a few months ago that he wants to bring 100% bonus depreciation back for any properties purchased January 20th of 2025 or after. There's this big tax bill right now that's being reviewed by the Senate, which has that exact rule in it. It's highly likely to pass. I would probably say it's like a 95% chance that it's going to go through. And so, yeah, we're I think when I'm talking to clients, I've been around 25 years when bonus depreciation first came out in 2001. I've seen it come and go. Has bipartisan support. It's great for businesses and stimulating the economy. So, I would put my money on it coming back for 2025 back to 100%.
And I think that's helpful for our listeners to just understand what's happening. And typically we try to make our episodes more evergreen. So I try not to talk about current events and what's going on. But I have to say, like, the bill, as we're recording this right now, okay, it's like June, it's like early June 2025. And the bill is absolutely in the news. Elon and Trump are going at it. It's wild. So by the time you listen to this, maybe this is already passed or, there's a resolution on this. But I think it's important too, because I know last year, a lot of investors were waiting to do their taxes because they were anticipating that the 100% bonus depreciation was going to get implemented and kind of backdated to properties in 2024. So they were waiting to see if they could apply it. And it sounds like that's not going to be the case. It's really going to apply to properties purchased in the year 2025, not going back to previous years.
Right. But look, it doesn't kill the cost segregation opportunity. It just makes it a little less attractive in year one. So, if you're not getting the bonus depreciation in year one, you're probably getting it in years 2, 3, 4, and 5. So,
can you talk about the timing of it? Like, if you already have a property and this is the first time you're hearing about cost segregation, can you go out and get a cost segregation if you've had it 3 years or 1 year? Or what's the time frame on when you can get this done?
Yeah, good question. The nice thing about cost seg, because it's related to depreciation, you can do it at any time. And so if you bought a property 10 years ago, you can capture any of the missed deductions that you should have taken without amending any tax returns. That's the key. You file this form 3115, that's the IRS form number, and you just claim what you should have taken over that 10-year period, and you get to take that, in the year you file that form and do the study.
And so, yeah, it's for a current property, right? The current property that you own.
Yeah, you couldn't, you can't have a situation where you bought it 10 years ago, then you sold it 5 years ago, and now you're trying to do it. You have to own it currently. Yeah.
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 Like sitting back like, man, when did I learn about this? Like there might be some properties I can go back. Yeah, I guess you can't go back and do all of that. No, that's awesome. And I think it's really great, right? It's another tool in the tool belt. It's another way to think about ways to keep more wealth. And the reality is, I think this is one of those tools where, and none of us are, this podcast is meant for educational purposes, but it's one of those things where you're looking at your tax situation. It's a strategy that could help you based on your unique situation, right? So for us, if you're looking at, a year where you're going to have some capital gains and you need some paper losses to offset it, this might be one of the strategies you utilize to help you in that situation. And it's one of the reasons syndication has become pretty popular over the last 6 or 7 years is because people learned about this more, and it was a tool that they could utilize for their investing approach. And I think that's really important for anyone who is looking to grow and scale, is learning more about the strategies to help you protect that wealth and protect your growth.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you also about, kind of as you look at opportunities moving forward, um, are there things on the horizon from a tax standpoint, even beyond cost segregation, that real estate investors should be paying attention to?
You know, um, yeah, I think with this tax bill, it is extending a lot of the old tax rules. So I think if if this tax bill wasn't going to pass, I think there'd be a lot more to be thinking about, especially the estate tax planning limits. That's kind of another thing as it relates to cost segregation that's really important. Um, a lot of people, maybe your listeners, may have parents that own real estate or have been in real estate. I will say that, y- when you're talking about estate planning, cost segregation kind of ties into this because when you pass away, if you're holding real estate, let's say mom and dad bought properties, 5 years ago, they're really old, you know, if, when they pass away, um, those property values, they get stepped up for tax purposes. And what that means is you get to start depreciation all over again. And that's important for cost segregation. So, let me kind of explain. So let's say mom and dad bought, you know, 5 properties for 2 million each. So they have $10 million of real estate that they bought in the last, 10 years. If if they do a bunch of cost seg studies and accelerate all these depreciation deductions and take it down, that 10 million down to 5 million, right? Get to wipe out all their income right now. If they pass away, you don't pay that recapture tax that we talked about earlier. That all kind of goes away with the way the rule is written. So it the beneficiary or the person who inherits the property, it, the value gets reset to what today's value is. So if those $10 million of properties are now worth 20 million, the basis starts over at 20 million for the beneficiary, right? And so now you can start depreciation on 20 million all over again. And so here's what is kind of interesting with that. Um, if mom and dad held those properties and never did the cost seg studies, right? And they just kept depreciating them over the longer life, and they, instead of taking $5 million of depreciation, they only took $1 million of depreciation, and then they pass away. They've just lost forever that ability to take that extra $4 million we talked about. The properties are going to get stepped up to that same $20 million number, right? And the beneficiary can start depreciation over again. But there's this unique kind of opportunity for estate planning. You absolutely want to take the depreciation, because if you don't use it, you lose it because of this step up rule. You see, normally, if I buy a property now, if I don't do the cost seg, it's okay. I will get those depreciation deductions eventually over the 27 and a half years. I will not lose them by not doing the cost seg. I will get them eventually. But when you're in that situation where you're older, you actually do lose them if you don't take it while you're alive.
John, I really appreciate you sharing that. I think it's something that many folks don't think about. When you think of kind of the estate planning component of this, And when we talk a lot about generational wealth, well, this is a component of that. You've got to understand the strategy behind that. And what you're talking about is you have to take advantage of the cost seg in that situation. Otherwise, you just lose those years of depreciation. And you certainly want to make sure that you have more capital and more freedom to invest in whatever you want to invest in. Hey, one last thing I wanted to ask, just going back to the recapture. I had an investor that says, hey, can I just not take the depreciation? So if they're going to force me to take the recapture from the back end anyway, can I just not take the depreciation in the first place? And which we explained to them, you could, but it would hurt you even more. Can you just give a little more context of why it's still smart for investors to take the depreciation, even if you have to recapture it?
Yeah, I mean, it really just comes down to a basic financial principle, which is the time value of money. It's if I give you, look, you get to decide. Do I want to pay $100,000 in tax this year, or I could avoid paying that $100,000 in tax and then instead pay $10,000 of tax over the next 10 years, right? Which one makes the most sense? You're paying the same amount of tax. You're just doing it either over a period of time or not. And so, that's really what this comes down to. I know I've kind of, made it kind of a simple kind of analogy, but really it's just you're getting to hold the money and borrow it, right, from yourself by doing a cost segregation study. Yes, you're going to have to pay it back, but you get to borrow it and you get to do something with it.
And to your point, like that's on the cost seg, right? That's the bonus depreciation. But for someone who's like, hey, well, let's just not do that because, hey, we have to pay it back. I think the thing people have to understand is like the government is going to, assume that you took the depreciation and tax you and treat you as if you took it either way. So whether you did the regular depreciation or the accelerated depreciation, if you're not claiming that depreciation just because you're like, oh, okay, well, I don't want to do recapture, they're already assuming you took it. And I don't know if people understand that if they're not actively in the tax space.
Yeah. It gets a little complicated here, and I don't want to get too deep because it'll go over people's heads. But if you just depreciate your building without doing a cost seg, yes, you're going to take some depreciation. That portion actually is not considered accelerated depreciation. That does not get recaptured at the same tax rate. So it's okay to take depreciation. It's only when you're talking about this accelerated depreciation that this recapture rule comes into play.
Yep. So all my CPAs, hopefully if this is new or something you're not as familiar with, we get regular depreciation. That's a standard accounting practice. But when you talk about the cost seg and accelerating it, there are certainly some strategies. And that's why it's important to have someone on your team who knows that. Gian and his team have some ability to help there. And you mentioned before, if you're interested in kind of the software, costsegregation.com is where you can go. Gian, where else can they reach out to you and your team?
Yeah, look, Gian Pazzia, Gian Pazzia, Pazzia. I'm the only one on LinkedIn. I promise you that. You can find me there. Follow me. You mentioned the website, costsegregation.com. I do want to mention for your listeners, I have a promo code that they could use. It's the promo code. If they go to that website, it's Insights 2025. So, and that's all capital. Insights 2025, all capital. You'll get a 10% discount for first-time users. And yeah, costsegregation.com. My company is KBKG.com. We do the bigger cost seg studies, for syndicators like yourself and so on as well.
I love it. Gian, appreciate you. Appreciate that guidance. We'll make sure we link to all that in the show notes. Right now, we're going to transition to our round of insights. When you think you found a great deal, asking the right questions could be the difference in finding a stud or a dud. Listen, we've put together a new guide to help you out. It's called 7 Questions You Must Ask Before Investing in Apartments. Now, in this guide, you're going to learn how to uncover red flags, quickly identify underwriting risk, vet sponsors and team members, and confirm key assumptions. Now, this is a guide that's going to help you be a better investor, whether you're an active investor or you're a passive investor looking to partner with other operators. Asking better questions is the key to identifying great opportunities. So download this free guide. Go to our website, casmoncapital.com/7questions. That's the number 7 questions. And you can access this free guide today. To make it easy on you, though, we've put a link in our show notes. So you go to the show notes, you can click that link and access the guide right now. This guide's going to help you make better investment choices, asking the right questions to build your portfolio. So be sure to download it today. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
I think early on in my career, probably, I got kind of lucky early on in my career. I kind of rode the wave of cost segregation in that there wasn't a lot of people that did what I did back 25 years ago. I think it's gotten a lot more competitive. If there's anything that maybe I would suggest is when things are going well in your business, don't get complacent. I think you always have to stay hungry. You always have to be worried about competitors, because I think, like anything, my biggest fear right now is just not moving as fast as the competition. And with technology moving as fast as it is, I think maybe we fell behind a little bit on, implementing technology in our business.
All right. Give me a digital or mobile technology that you would recommend for our listeners.
Yeah, ChatGPT. I know it's an easy answer, but man, I use that all day, every day. And there's so much you can do with it. I don't know. They just came out just this week where you can connect it to like SharePoint. You can connect it to your Outlook. You can connect it to HubSpot. And basically now, our entire company sits on top of SharePoint. 25 years of records and files and everything. And now we can literally ask ChatGPT anything and it could find it, then in this complete mess of where our documents are. So it's getting so cool right now.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
In the last year, I've 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's a simple one, but it's a story-based one. It's good for people that have teams that they're trying to build up. So if, especially if you have partners and deals and you're working together, I think that's a good one when you're trying to build like a leadership team.
What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
I'm big on lists and writing things down. And, I have like just the old school notebooks, but I'm constantly ripping up pages and starting it all over again and prioritizing what really makes the most sense. And that's kind of key for me, is just making sure we always figure out what is the most important thing to get done today.
What is your number one insight for getting a cost seg analysis?
I think just making sure that you're getting a company that knows what they're doing, because there are a lot of there's a lot of low cost providers. So look, there's a society out there called the American Society of Cost Segregation Professionals. It's really the only way you can tell if the person you're using knows what they're doing. It's kind of like, when you're looking for a CPA, there's a designation, right? You want to use a CPA. Well, it's the same thing with cost segregation. You want to make sure that they have, it's called a CCSP next to their name, Certified Cost Segregation Professional.
I love it. And we mentioned it, or we were talking earlier, I know you're out there on the West Coast, out in LA. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Well, I lived in Chicago for a lot of years, so my favorite place to eat is getting one of those Chicago hot dogs.
I love it, man. One of those dogs dragged through the garden, getting all sorts of toppings on it.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
I love it. But Gian, you gave us a lot of great stuff. I appreciate you sharing a little bit more about your background, breaking into the cost seg world early as an engineer, working on some larger accounts, larger projects, and helping us understand how, every level of investor can leverage cost segregation to help them save on their taxes, right? Whether you are, syndicating, doing commercial real estate deals with other investors, or you've got a rental, just a single rental house, you can leverage this from software all the way to having the more traditional cost seg approach. And just really helping us understand some of the things that are coming down the pipeline with bonus depreciation and will they go back to 100% or not, and just how to leverage these different strategies to grow and scale your portfolio. I particularly love the step up basis comment that, hey, you probably want to go ahead and take this, especially if you're older either way, because you're going to get that number reset on that step up basis when through, due to an estate transition anyway. So you want to take advantage of it as you can and not lose that value. So really great info. Again, if folks want to learn more, they can check out the website, costsegregation.com. You've got that promo code Insights 2025, all capitalization. And as well, you can find Gian on LinkedIn, which we'll put a link to his LinkedIn page in our show notes as well. Gian, thank you again for being a great guest coming on the show today. We look forward to staying in touch with you and I hope you have a great day.